Ladies and gentlemen, and since we have such a huge agenda, I am going to start promptly because we need to get through this quickly, or as quickly as possible. There is a lunch break at 12:30, and the reason I'm starting by announcing that is that if we go on beyond 12:30, initially it will be your lunch break that will be sacrificed. Only if the meeting runs a lot longer than 12:30 will I consider postponing the start of the second half of the meeting from 1:30. On the other hand, the second half of the meeting will not begin before 1:30 because we have advertised that widely, and we need to be fair to everyone interested in the Camborne to Cambridge scheme. So, I'm going to start with apologies for absence. So, do we have any apologies for absence, please? I don't think we have any apologies for absence. Is that correct? Yes. All right then. So it is my great pleasure actually to welcome a new member, Councillor Heather Williams, who is joining us. She has succeeded Councillor Peter Topping. Peter Topping could always be counted on for a memorable phrase, and there was one particular phrase which sticks out in my memory, but I'm enjoined not to repeat it at the start of this meeting. But we will miss his memorable phrases, but we look forward to equally memorable phrases from you, Councillor Williams, so welcome, and look forward to your contributions to our proceedings. Are there any declarations of interest then? Yes, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Chair, notwithstanding the ongoing issue around CAM, which comes to us out of my day job at Marshall of Cambridge, is on the east side of Cambridge on item 12, therefore I should declare an interest.
Thank you very much. Are there any other? Yes.
I'm involved with the housing charity that is mentioned in the quarterly update around temporary housing.
Thank you very much. Any more declarations of interest? Yes.
My wife, Sarah Ferguson, is an assistant director with the Cambridgeshire County Council, and there may be occasions when there is conflict, which I'll declare depending on the issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more declarations of interest? Okay, I have declarations of interest, which is that I am an alumnus of sorts of Robinson College, Cambridge, which is closely located to Adams Road and the Rifle Range track. And I am also a member of the North Uttlesford Garden Community Steering Group, which is mentioned in the Whittlesford item at the end of the meeting. Okay, of course, if it occurs to any of you during the course of the any item that you do have an interest that you ought to declare, then feel free to declare it at the time. Right then, that takes us to the minutes of the previous meeting. So let's get to those and we'll run through them. Yes, at this point I realise that I haven't picked them up from my agenda, from my pigeonhole. So, yes, I have a spare copy here, but I haven't got the page numbers on them. So we'll have to run through the pages which are in the agenda in front of you. So does anyone have any problems on page 4? Page 5, page 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No one has signalled anything, so full marks. You have a clean bill of health there, and I have looked forward to signing those as a correct record. Okay, on to questions from members of the public. We've had 22 public questions submitted in time. There was one that was much too late, and I'm sorry I couldn't accept that one. But I've decided to accept all the 22 questions that came to my notice by the deadline. I did have the opportunity of condensing some of those where the questions were on the same item, but I've decided to allow everyone anyone who wished to raise a question to speak, and because I do believe very passionately in allowing members of the public, especially those who are motivated to attend and give us the benefit of their wisdom, to allow them to speak. However, I will have to be quite strict on timekeeping, and I would ask all questioners to respect the traffic light which is on the table, and we'll explain that as we go along. There's one question on item 6, the Citizens' Assembly, 4 questions on 7, City Access, 3 on item 8, Greenways, and 14 on item 10, Camborne to Cambridge. We've also had, I'm sure all members have been receiving a very large number of letters from members of the public and other interested parties. I have attempted to respond individually to all those that appear to me to be individually composed. I haven't been quite so assiduous in replying to those that have been, or to appear to me to have been slight variations on a standard theme. But I have read all of them. And can I just make a plea? I know this is not going out to the universe, but if you write a letter to me, I assume that you haven't already sent it to every other member, and I feel obliged to share it with the other members. And then, of course, it turns out that many of those have been shared already with other members, and they get a bit uppity that their inboxes are being clogged. So if you do write to me as chairman, if you could clarify that you've also copied it to other members, that would be very helpful in the future. You have in front of you, I think, members, copies of 2 most recent pieces of correspondence, and I particularly draw your attention to the comparison of the inset tables for Adams Road and the Rifle Range, which have been referred to by quite a few questioners. That is also the subject of one of the attachments in the letter that we received from a barrister on behalf of one of the questioners on the Camborne to Cambridge scheme. I need to point out that this body is not the decision-making body, but obviously those papers have been shared with us, and it's quite appropriate if you wish to refer to any of those. But we are not the decision-maker, and there are limits to the extent to which we can refine the system, or refine the proposal at this stage, and the Transport Director will clarify all that when we get to that point. Okay, on to petitions. Oh, yeah, sorry.
You refer to a document there that's supposed to be on the table there, the comparisons.
Yes, have we not all had that? I think, yes, this is the one from Mr. Doyley. Oh, I'm sorry. You haven't necessarily all got paper copies, but I did make sure that this was sent out. We can get the paper copies printed for this afternoon, because, as I say, this table has been the subject of a great deal of discussion, and I think I feel it's important that members are aware of the existence of that table, and that it is the subject of quite a lot of discussion out there. Okay, sorry, back to petitions. We haven't had a petition submitted in accordance with the protocol, which is on our website and is widely advertised. However, Mr. Strauss, who will be speaking, asking a question in the Camborne to Cambridge item, will be referring to a petition which has received about 3,000 signatures, and if you look at those, a great many of them are from the Cambridge and the surrounding area. However, we're not able to accept that as a formal petition to our meeting today, and so we leave it to Mr. Strauss to explain more about that when he asks his question. Right then, so we come on to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is the item 6, the report and recommendations of the Greater Cambridge Citizens' Assembly. We're going to start by hearing the public question, then we're going to get an answer from an officer, then we're going to have a presentation from Involve. We have two, I think, Citizens Assembly members who are going to tell us about the process, and even before they start speaking to us, I'm going to remind all members that if they have any questions of clarification for those two members, they should be restricted to the process aspect, because it was a collective endeavour, and we have the report, the overall report from Involve, which sums up all the discussions. There'll be questions from Assembly members, and then we'll have our debate. So, can I start off by inviting David Stoughton, I hope I have your pronunciation correctly, to ask your question. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yes. You understand the traffic light system, I hope. When the red one goes off, you've had your 3 minutes, and I might ask you to call the halt. But off you go. Thank you.
And good morning. Thank you for allowing me to address you all. I'd like to start by drawing your attention to the survey which was distributed prior to this event, and I hope you've had time to have at least a glance over. I'm not going to go through the results in any detail.
Could I ask you to speak more closely to the microphone, please?
Yes,
there are some
sorry.
people behind you can't hear.
I'm not going to slavishly go through everything in the survey, but I'd like to draw attention to 2 points there. The first is the number of households that appear to have people suffering from breathing-related conditions. At over 25%, that's really quite alarming in view of the pressure put on the NHS by pollution-caused breathing problems. I'd like to add there that since this survey, the 4-year-old daughter of a resident in our block has developed breathing problems. And that's really emphasised the alarm across the area, given the growing volume of research that there is, showing that it is the peaks in pollution rather than the mean levels, the average, which is being talked about, that actually causes the physiological harm. And being where we are, we have many peaks. Secondly, almost all residents feel not only that is the traffic problem and pollution in the area bad at the moment, but it can only get worse. That's surely alarming, at least for some of you, in the light of they don't seem to trust their councils to look after their interests. In addition, we've been concerned to see more families with children buying or moving into the area, and particularly on the polluted streets. Now, while some aspects of CB1's problems are specific to the location and the station traffic, there are many areas in Cambridge equally suffering just as badly from high levels of traffic and from long jams at peak hours. And given the levels of development planned, this can only get worse. You've conducted a survey and you've held a citizens' assembly, both of which highlighted the need for urgent action. Will this body now decide to make more than cosmetic changes to regulation of private transport and the provision of public transport? And more than that, accepting that drivers need time to adapt to a changed environment, will you espouse a progressive scheme that will, perhaps in defined stages, lead to meeting the net zero emissions target of the City Council within 10 years? Now, I recognise that those are both, what you say, rhetorical questions at this stage. So my direct question is, what powers or leverage does the body have to ensure that its decisions are implemented?
Thank you very much, and great timing. So if you could press the button in front of you to start the question. Do any members have questions or clarification for Mr. Stoughton? No? Okay, so if we could have an answer from Isabel. Yes, right there.
Right, so thank you for sharing the results of the survey, and they have been circulated to all members and also published along with the questions. So last June, the Executive Board formally agreed that improving air quality needed to be a key consideration in developing the final strategy, and the Citizens' Assembly, as you said, also considered air quality issues in their deliberations. The paper for item 7 does look at the potential impacts of different interventions on air quality, including measures to encourage more trips by public transport, walking and cycling, to decrease the number of car trips, and to support the electrification of vehicles, particularly buses. And these would all help address air quality issues and address those resulting health impacts. So kind of the Joint Assembly will discuss those measures under that item.
Thank you very much. Yep, you're free to leave. Thank you very much. But thank you for bringing that survey to our attention and for raising the profile of respiratory implications of poor air. Right then, Isabel, you're going to introduce Susanna, and Susanna then is going to give us a presentation and possibly even a video. But anyway, all over to you now. Yeah.
So thank you, Chair. So I'm going to just ask Susanna and Zara to come up and sit here, because I'm not going to say very much to introduce this item. They're going to speak to it. Obviously, we held the Citizens' Assembly in September and October this year, and this paper outlines some of the key findings. Susanna is from Involve, who designed and ran the Assembly and wrote the report, so she will take you through the findings. And Zara was one of the participants in the Assembly, and she will talk a bit about the experience of being a member of that Assembly. There's just a couple of things for the Joint Assembly. So the first is that the Greater Cambridge Partnership needs to respond to the Citizens' Assembly, and we're suggesting that a kind of full response should be made by the summer 2020. And in forming that response, some of the content from the paper at item 7 will help to support that. And the other thing is that the Citizens' Assembly have asked that they stay involved in kind of in our work beyond today and beyond kind of the Executive Board meeting. And it might be that the Joint Assembly wants to discuss how that could happen as well. So over to Susanna.
Thank you, Isabel. So yes, I'm Susanna, I'm from Involve. We're a public participation charity, and we ran the Citizens' Assembly. This is Zara, who we'll hear from in a minute, who is an Assembly member. Another Assembly member was due to come along. Unfortunately, she's sick today, but may be coming to the Executive Board meeting. So I'll go through a bit about the Assembly and the findings. We'll hear from Zara, and then we'll look at the video as well. So just a quick reminder, the Assembly was part of a actually wider national programme as part of the Innovation in Democracy programme, which the departments DCMS and MHCLG funded. So Cambridge was just one of 3 councils that received additional funding to run this. And I think it's worth kind of acknowledging Cambridge's kind of leadership role in what has become now a sort of deliberative wave across the country of interest in these sorts of processes to help inform decision-making. A reminder of the question that we set the Assembly. So how do we reduce congestion, improve air quality, and provide better public transport in Greater Cambridge? In terms of who was involved, and just a really quick recap on the method of a Citizens' Assembly, it's a way to bring together randomly selected members of the public that represent the area in a mini public, as it says there, of Greater Cambridge and the wider travel to work area. So they're invited through random selection rather than by their necessarily just turning up because they have an interest in that topic. And what we're seeking to do is to spend time to learn about, to understand, to question, to deliberate before coming up with recommendations on the topic at hand. So we're seeking to go beyond opinion and really look to what judgment that group would have. So 10,000 invitations were sent out, 60 Assembly members were recruited, and 53 completed the full 2 weekends in September and October. And the group represented the gender, age, ethnicity, geography, socioeconomic, travel modes and travel regularity criteria that represent Cambridge. And all of the Assembly members received, if they wish to take, £150 per weekend for taking part. There's lots of detail in the report, but really quickly, over the 2 weekends, we learnt about the context and the impact of congestion, air quality. We looked at visions, both locally from stakeholders and also elsewhere, what else have other areas done. And then the Assembly came up with their own kind of criteria, their own sort of vision, priority vision statements. The second weekend was about exploring different hard and softer measures to address the issues and what were the pros and cons of those before finally voting on a series of questions. So over the weekends, 18 expert inputs from a range of experts and over 1,300 people hours of deliberation. So this is just very quickly, the priority visions that people came up with, the vision statements. So up there at the top, affordable public transport, fast and reliable public transport, and environmental and zero carbon being quite high up, restricting the city centre to only clean and electric vehicles and being people-centred. I won't go through them all. We then took a series of votes, and I am going to skip through these and just focus on two, but votes which were around what are the measures that you would take around reducing congestion and creating road space, what would be your preferred way of improving air quality, and what would be your preferred way of raising funds to improve public and active transport. And then this slightly kind of spaghetti-like diagram was one of the fourth vote that we took, where we said, given these measures, how far would you strongly support or oppose all of the measures that were there? And what you can see there is that closing roads to cars had the strongest support, with 30 Assembly members giving it a strongly support vote. And clean air zone, flexible charge, pollution charge, also some strong support there. So all of the measures, actually, if you look at that, all of the measures except for the workplace parking levy and increase parking charges received more than 70% support or strongly support. So again, a kind of, and I'll come on to this, a kind of strong call for action. This was the fifth vote where, again, we gave all of the different options and said, overall, what would be your preferred way to address the question? And again, you can see there that closing roads to cars came up quite highly, and that the charging options also were sort of in a bundle as second. In this vote, no one put no intervention as their first choice. So people had a preference of, what was their first preference, second, and so on. And the numbers there relate to what's called a border count. So if there were 6 options, your first preference got 6 points, and so on. So we also looked at what we called supporting measures. So these were other things that might enable the system to change around those sort of harder measures of things like closing roads. And these were developed in the main by Assembly members as things that they wanted to see. And what you can see then, and we took a kind of electronic vote on this, and just the top 5 there, the mayor to franchise buses, planting trees and hedges to absorb carbon, promotion of electric bikes as an option to get around more, the orbital or kind of lollipop bus service, and also long-distance park and rides as a way to sort of take the kind of long-distance traffic and then bring people in. So in conclusion, a real desire for action and ambition. Road closures across the board were the most popular choice. Road charging options in different forms followed. Increased parking charges most strongly opposed and least strongly supported, and along with workplace parking levy. No intervention across the board received the least number of preferences, and as I've said before, those supporting measures that were there. After we'd done the vote, we then asked the Assembly members to consider, right, what are your key messages back to the Joint Assembly, back to the Executive Board, having heard that. And here we see, again, and I think if you listen to the live stream of the final plenary, be brave, be bold, take action was really a kind of common theme. Improvements in public transport needing to come first, especially if there was a sort of a charge there. Very much that the funding from the charging, which I know is in place, needs to be ring-fenced and seen to be ring-fenced for transport in Greater Cambridge. A desire for better integration and coordination of transport across Greater Cambridge. Fairness being seen as a key principle in any measures that are taken forward, as well as exemptions for essential users, blue badge holders, and so on. And a desire, I think, for Cambridge to take the grasp here and to be the best and make Cambridge #1, and conversely, that if it's not addressed, that this will be to the detriment of Cambridge as a whole. A desire to see some of the immediate actions that could be taken progressed more quickly, and also transparency and monitoring and feedback. What's happening, what's being taken forward, what steps are being taken, and if not, why not? And particularly the Assembly members were keen to see that taken forward as a report back to their group. Just finally, then, we ran an evaluation, well, actually, Renaissance, which was a separate organisation, ran an evaluation, and their full report has yet to come out. But there was one question which I've just pulled out, where we said, how far do you agree with the recommendations put forward? And there you see, again, strongly agree with the set of recommendations which came forward. So that was a bit of a rattle through, but I thought it was useful now to hear from Zara, and I've got just some questions that we've been through, which I'll ask. Is that okay? So Zara, why did you decide to take part in the Citizens' Assembly?
I got the invite. It came through my door randomly, and it struck my attention that this is about Cambridge. I love Cambridge. I've lived in Cambridge since year 2000. It's my home, so it attracted me. But also, I was part of the Addenbrooke's consultation. I work on the site, so I have an idea.
Okay, yes, okay. You can see that we have members of the audience who are flapping to, if you could get slightly closer
Yes.
to the microphone.
Okay.
Please don't be intimidated. They're just desperately desperately keen to hear what you have to say. So.
I was just saying that I got the invite through my door, and it's about Cambridge. I love Cambridge. It's my home, so I literally just opted in immediately. I got the invite. But also, I was part of the Addenbrooke's public consultation of the biomedical campus. So I had a little idea of possibly what it would look like.
So Zara, how did you find the experience? Was it as you expected?
No, actually, I was very surprised because it was so different from the other consultations I've been to on the basis of the Addenbrooke's site. This was... When we came on the first day, when we realized we were only 50-something in the room, we were all a bit shocked. It couldn't possibly be just us. So it was explained to us that we were chosen on a basis of a certain criteria. So it was exciting, but it also drummed home the responsibility that was put on us because I was representing some very important criteria and important people out there. So it made us sat up and realize that we have something very important and probably very pioneering to be part of here.
So what did you get out of taking part in the Assembly?
It was an honor to be part of something as big as that, to actually be representing a certain category at a level, that would truly make an impact to people's life. I'm a nurse by background, so it's important to me that, I see lots of sick people coming to the hospital. So the presentation by the gentleman there was very, very pertinent. I know families and friends who have become sick. I also developed asthma, along the way, living in Cambridge. So it was something that I believe that hopefully when we did a good job, it might address issues properly. So to me, that is a big takeaway.
So having been through that, what do you hope will happen to the conclusions now?
Well, your slide have said it loud and clear, and I will just reiterate that. we all agreed unanimously. I could remember on the day in the room, we all shouted out, we want it done as we did it. It's a lot of our time and effort that we put in there, and we took the time to talk to others. You know, you asked us to talk to others and find out some more. So we believe we represented the community really well. So we think that what we brought to the table should be taken seriously by those that can do something about it.
And just finally, what struck you most about what you heard at this assembly? Was there any sort of standout?
Yes, the presentation by the economist, she's there at the back of the room. She showed us a video that showed the overview of Cambridge from 7 o'clock in the morning till somewhere around 10 o'clock. And it showed us how the traffic troops into Cambridge, and with it, how the climate changed. You know, the density of the pollution was just visible. We're just gobsmacked, really. We couldn't believe that this was really happening around us, but it made sense and correlates with all the conditions we are seeing as well. So that was quite a striking moment for all of us there, I think.
Thanks, Zara. So I think we've now got a little vox pop video of some of the other Assembly members talking about their experience.
I'm Bethany and I'm from Witchford, which is out Ely way.
Hello there, I'm Vaughan and I'm based just off Mill Road in Cambridge.
My name is Zara and I live off Histon Road, Darwin Drive, Cambridge City.
So my name's Nikki and I live in East Chesterton.
I kind of thought there'd be a lot more of them talking, people talking to us and saying, these are the ideas we have, and then we'd have to sort of give our opinions on them. So I'm quite pleased to see that instead we're giving our opinions and we're the ones sort of deciding what's best for our areas. They're actually taking into consideration what we know about what's going on.
I wasn't too sure what to expect. I just knew that we were going to be talking about various subjects. And then I wasn't too sure at all when I heard we'd only be discussing 3 areas. Why weren't we including things like climate change or what have you? But then I began to realise that it was actually a good thing limiting us just to 3 areas, because as you start to combine everybody's wants and needs in those, it becomes a terribly complicated problem to try and solve.
So I expected there to be sort of more debate and differences of opinion, but actually people are very much on the same page. Everybody is agreeing that we need to sort out congestion, and everyone agrees that we need to improve our air quality. There's a good level of understanding of the issues, and you know, obviously people have different ideas about how we do that, but in terms of whether we need to do that, everybody is in agreement that it's an important issue that needs to be sorted.
It's been actually surprisingly fulfilling, let's put it that way, because we are getting to the end and we seem to have, you know, have gotten to some kind of definite, we're beginning to see this morning a definite direction in which we are going.
I think it's interesting how they managed to get such a wide variety of people to come and discuss things, but also the experts. They've got different experts talking about different things. It's everything you need to hear and consider.
I'm just glad to be part of a citizens' assembly that is helping to change things in Cambridge. That is the bottom line for me. It wasn't too important for me that my personal voice come out of it. So, but I'm glad that I was here, and I feel like I've had the opportunity to contribute to, you know, changes that we'll hopefully start to see. Some of them maybe very quickly, within a year or so, you know, we'll begin to feel the impact of some of the things that has come up here. So that's hugely more important than maybe a personal voice that I may have come here with at the initial stage.
citizens' assemblies do have value, but they would have even more value if they were binding, so that the local authorities, etc., actually had to enact the recommendations that came out of them. At the moment, the ones that I've heard of in the UK have just been advisory, and although they do have some value, they could just end up as a report in the bottom of, you know, a filing cabinet, and that would be a great shame. I think they have the capacity to become a really valuable tool in our democracy.
Right then, is it back to me? Yes, well, I find it difficult to restrain my enthusiasm for the Citizens' Assembly, because I watched every piece of the live feed, which, you know, maybe like watching paint dry if you're sitting at home and looking at a screen, but it was actually very entertaining, and I particularly enjoyed the final half hour when we actually heard from table representatives, and I think we shared the link to that with all members, and if you haven't heard that final half hour where you get the tables representatives summing up their recommendations, it's well worth listening to. I'm very grateful to you, Zara, particularly for coming along today and sharing your thoughts with us. Anyway, that's enough rabbiting for me. Members, do you have any questions for Susanna or Zara? Yes, Mr. Walkinshaw, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, not so much a question, really hugely in support, and commend Susanna and team for organising it so brilliantly, selecting people who represented so many different aspects, and not just the city centre, but also those who have to travel outside. Zara, thank you for talking us through. I think it's encouraging but not surprising that the conclusions are as they are, the need for bold action. There's no doubt that reflects an increasing desire locally that we need to take action. It is a basket of measures which will include some difficult things in it, but we all have to move forward to try and make it better for Cambridge. So really just to commend the Assembly. I think it's an excellent piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
I went along as an observer for one of the mornings and was hugely impressed by how seriously everybody was taking it and how animated the conversation was. And I guess I was just echoing what Christopher said. What comes out of it most strongly to me is the desire to be bold, brave and take action, which I strongly endorse, but might not have been an outcome. There might well, I guess, have been an outcome which was, well, we need to be really cautious and this is all very complicated and it's all very long term. And on the contrary, the Citizens' Assembly, it seemed to me, got it and got how kind of serious the issues are and how urgent our responses need to be. So I think it was a very useful and worthwhile exercise.
Any other observations, members? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just one more observation. What came through clearly in the video was that the Citizens' Assembly really do want to see feedback from the GCP about how we're taking this forward. The summary information from the survey, I think, is a very good start for that, in terms of if we can map through the objectives from the survey and the responses from the Citizens' Assembly to every piece of action that we take forward, then I think that would be a good way to maintain that momentum and ensure that we are truly maintaining that alignment with the Citizens' Assembly.
Thank you very much. I'm just checking whether there's anything formally that we're supposed to do with this. At the end of paragraph 1.2, yes, I will take you, Mike, sorry, just a minute. The Joint Assembly is invited to comment on the process and outcomes of the Citizens' Assembly and how the findings should be incorporated into future decision-making, including the material set out in item 7, and in particular the list of short-term measures which should form an immediate response to the Citizens' Assembly's call for action. So we won't go into item 7 yet, because item 7 is covering up. But if there's anything that can be wrapped up in item 6 before I move on, then do contribute. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to check that the recommendations that are made at the end, particularly around road closure, which came out very clearly and strongly, will be picked up, and detailed plans will come back to the June meeting. That's where the discussions will be taking place that Isabel referred to later. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to be picked up in item 7 or if that's one for here. It's about the detail of the plans, because quite clearly from the Citizens' Assembly, road closures came up as a very high priority, and if we are to be fast and bold, then we need detailed plans in June rather than we think we should have road closures. So it's just about the level of detail, I think, for June. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, that's worth mentioning. Yeah, worth observing. Yeah.
So just to clarify then, I think that point particularly will be picked up under the next item when we're talking more about the type of interventions. I think, you know, we will support the Chair in summing up the Assembly's views for the Chair's report back to the Board, which has been supportive of the process of a Citizens' Assembly, and we'll reflect those comments made. But in terms of what we then do with that, we're trying to link that very much to the next report.
Just being devil's advocate here, can anyone pick any holes in the Citizens' Assembly process? Does anyone feel there was something that wasn't quite right about it, or that should have been done better, or anything? Yeah?
Chair, I think there is a hole, and that would be if we ignore what is said. We put a lot of time and money and effort into this, and it seemed to have come over very well, and there's a lot we can learn from. So the hole is actually if we do nothing as a result.
Yes, well, I'll clarify that. The point there's clearly not a fault that can be laid at the door of Involve or any of the participants, I don't think. That responsibility lies with us, I believe, and indeed all the local authorities in Cambridgeshire. So I'm getting the impression that there is overwhelming enthusiasm for the process and general support for the outcomes, and a feeling that we do have responsibility to respond and keep them involved as we take this process forward. Well, thank you, Susanna, very much, and Zara. Thank you very much again for coming. That was much appreciated. Okay, right then. So that does move us on to item 7, which is public transport improvements and the city access strategy. Again, we're going to start with the public questions. We're going to receive some answers to those questions, and then we're going to receive the officer's presentation. And then I believe you've all had a copy of the recommendation that Councillor Bick has cobbled together, and I mean that in the I mean that in the most complimentary sense, which I will come to when I comment on it myself, and then we will have a debate, and so we will take it from there. Yes, So sorry if that was the wrong turn of phrase. Right. So if we could start with Mal Schofield, please, come to the table. And you know the drill because you're a regular contributor to our proceedings. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me all right? Well, good morning. Just in the way of an introduction, somebody has to say it, and I will say it, because it's thanks really to the team opposite here, to Peter and Rachel, that we've got enough information really to last a lifetime. In order to make the sensible decisions. There is one exception to that, and we haven't really caught up with it yet, and that is the ARC report. Which is now published. I mean, it's a January publication, but it's essential reading really for us all to provide the spatial strategy. So you've got my concerns. They're very clear. What I want to say is just 3 very quick points. I continue to champion growth. I'm not. I'm probably in the minority, strange enough, even in a progressive city like Cambridge in that respect. The ongoing unresolved issue is sustainability. There was no comprehensive long-term development context for the region until the publication of that report that I've just mentioned. The CPER report recommends a blended strategy. If you know the choices there, really, of where and how we develop our new housing. And one of them that I find very concerning is the development along transport corridors. And this I would make particular reference to Camborne and Cambridge there. Such choices make sense when linked by rail and reliable services. As presently configured, however, journey time and accessibility are the issue. The more stops, the longer the journey takes. We know that. That's the reality. So if you have 12 stops, what is 12 times 3 minutes, 5 minutes? Is it 3 minutes or 5 minutes? That's 60 minutes, that's an hour. So if you have 2 stops, it's substantially less than that. So that's really that's where it is. The issue is further complicated by the siting and use of P&R hubs. Because if you add in the hub, you've got to get there, you've got to stop, you've got to take on board, and you've got to start again. If you're crossing main lanes of traffic, that takes time as well. And that's certainly true of Scotland Farm. And the final point, the Greater Cambridge Local Plan is now under consultation. Comprehensive briefing notes have been published. You've got in there, included in there, a sustainability appraisal. As it stands, it needs to be developed further in order to address the impact of travel behaviour of housing developments in public transport corridors. What we have at the moment is a plethora of choices and alternatives. And if you're going to meet that excellent Assembly overwhelming recommendation, which is more space, less cars and more space, what you have got to do is to be very clear how you're going to reallocate that space. 100% to cyclists, 100% to pedestrians, 100% to public transport, or proportions of that for all three. I don't know the answer to that, but it requires substantially more work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or clarification? No? Oh, thank you. You're free to go. Thank you very much. The next question is Dr. Brian Robertson. Is he with us? Yes? Ah. Oh, yeah. Do I allow people to read questions? We have done. Yes, I will let you come to the table. Yes, I want the question to be heard, so you might as well read it as me. So it makes, yeah, and you might have extra things to say, which I'm also quite keen to hear. So yes, please come to the table.
The big one. Okay, sorry. Just for context, I'm Roxanne from CamCycle, and we just had an email from Brian asking if we could read his question. His work commitments, but particularly because he wants to find out which councillors are going to support this motion. So he wants to make sure I ask that. Right, Brian's question. Which voting members of the GCP will support a motion to prioritise active travel? A supplementary question is, will you please place and vote for a prioritise active travel motion? And he notes that details of this motion can be seen in Councillor Bartington's prioritise active travel motion passed by Oxfordshire County Council, attached as background information. So I do believe if Brian was here, he'd like to see a show of hands.
I'm not sure I can really do a show of hands, but I'm sure it will come out in the discussion how many of us are keen to support active travel. I don't think I'm going to speak out of turn by saying I'm a cyclist and therefore I'm likely to support active travel. But I'm sure if you watch the discussion afterwards, it will become obvious who's keen on active travel. But it's a good question. Thank you very much. And actually, are you giving the next question? Oh no. Okay, right there. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Right then.
Hi. So I'm Anna Williams, also from CamCycle, and this is our question. CamCycle welcomes the update on the city access strategy, and thanks all those involved for the amount of research conducted on this project. It's clear that both scientific evidence and public opinion support the goal of switching a significant number of journeys in and around Cambridge to walking, cycling and public transport. It's also clear that this must be done to support local authorities on their journey to zero carbon, improve local air quality and people's health, address issues of transport inequality in the area, reduce congestion and maintain a thriving economic region attractive to businesses, and make Cambridge a nicer place to live, work and travel. We strongly support the proposals to improve junctions for those walking and cycling, trial car-free days, subsidise electric bike hire, develop a lease scheme for e-bikes and cargo cycles, improve and increase cycle parking, and work with schools and businesses to increase levels of cycling. We also strongly support the building of increased cycle infrastructure and the piloting of further road closures, modal filters and community streets. These measures are essential to the growth of cycling in the area for all ages and abilities. We welcome the forthcoming publication of the Cambridgeshire LC Whip, and we also support additional demand management measures such as a flexible congestion charge. However, we are concerned that the timely action required may be compromised by the lack of a joint approach between the local authorities. We understood from media reports that the councils would be working to resolve their differences in a workshop this month. So we'd like to ask the Joint Assembly to confirm that this workshop has taken place and to ask when the essential measures included in this report to improve the health, well-being and success of our city will begin to be implemented.
Thank you very much. Any questions of clarification? No? Okay, thank you very much. And then finally on this item, we have Lillian Runblatt, who is also a regular contributor. And you also are familiar with the traffic light system, aren't you? I wasn't going to be so rude. No, carry on. Microphone, please, Lillian. Press the microphone. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I'm Lillian, and I'm from Histon Road Area Residents Association. I hope to learn more from you. And it's about clear air zones and air pollution, emissions, and particulates, impact on health and welfare. So the residents' health is at stake at the moment. The improved transport schemes that are rolled out will increase damages to the health, not only physical health, but it's also mental health that's come up in lately. 55% of roadside traffic pollution is made of non-exhaust particles such as brake, tire, and road surface wear. While legislation has driven down exhaust emissions, the non-exhaust particulates emissions has increased. And the electrical cars and the hybrids, they will not reduce any exhaust emissions. They're still particulate polluters. And I noticed that you have forgotten the word particulates in points 2.4, 3.4, 4.21, but it was mentioned in 4.13. So many cities in Europe have already introduced Class 2 zones and Euro 6 standards as on their major arterial routes into the city centres and expand their clear air zones. The introduced Class 2 and Euro zone on arterial roads such as Histon, which is a comparatively short road, and in coordination with the present GCP construction ending sometime in 2021. Cambridge would then expand the clean air zones from the junction with Huntington and Victoria, reducing exhaust emissions. Well, to cope with the non-exhaust emissions, particulates, the most effective source of trees and hedges. Certain species of trees are more effective than others, and they should be planted on the highway boundary by the actual vehicle emissions. This week is the start of the site clearance, and there will be quite substantial losses of greenery. It leaves little protection for cyclists and pedestrians, as well as front gardens. So, with the increased vehicle traffic expected due to the expansion from 2 to 3 lanes and the improved guided bus B single-decker route to Addenbrooks, with more buses per hour, HRA asks the Joint Assembly to encourage the officers to investigate the inclusion of Histon Road in the Cambridge Clean Air Zone and introduce Class 2 and Euro 6 standards by the end of the construction in summer 2021. And I will say, like Greta Thunberg, listen to the scientists, act now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for clarification? No? Okay, thank you, Lillian. You're free to depart. I have Peter. You're going to answer these or respond to the questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few comments to each of the questioners. So in terms of the first question from Mal Schofield, I think that you just emphasised the size and scale of the challenge that we've got here, that hopefully is captured in the paper that the members have got before them now, and really what some of the policy levers are that can be grasped to try and tackle it. I would make a particular point around electrification, which was one of the issues you raised in your written letter, that electrification clearly has a role to play, but in of itself, it will not tackle congestion. It will offer local benefits to air quality, but congestion requires a balance package to deal with the sort of the wider programme that we're considering. In terms of Dr. Robertson's question, and follow the Chair's lead, that I'm sure this will come up in terms of the Assembly's discussion. But again, I think just to emphasise the point that sustainable and active travel is a key part of the policy levers that are outlined in the report. And indeed, in terms of our current work programme, we are actively pushing walking and cycling initiatives that try and develop active travel solutions to the Greater Cambridge communities. In terms of the question from Cam Cycle, I think those conversations are ongoing, and today is part of the conversation whereby the partners in the Greater Cambridge area are recognising the challenge that we've got and want to talk constructively about what solutions we can come forward to. The essential measures that you've outlined, many of which are sort of outlined in the paper itself, will be part of today's discussion and will be part of the considerations of the Executive Board when they consider this paper next month. And finally, in terms of Lillian, obviously we've had the conversation before around Histon Road, and you would expect me to say, wouldn't you, that vegetation is going back and there will be more trees on Histon Road when we finish than there is currently. But in terms of your wider point, clean air zones are one of the policy areas that can tackle some of the challenges that we've got. They're outlined in the paper, and therefore policy makers, decision makers to consider in terms of their discussions and deliberations.
Thank you. And you are going on to invite Isabel to introduce the report.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to make a couple of opening comments, and I will be brief. This is a weighty tome. Actually, we make no excuse for that. When you last considered this, you were aware of the sort of the issues, the challenges, and really the sort of the analytical and evidence that needs to be considered and thought through to deliver what policy options and policy levers that you've got. I do need to offer a bit of mea culpa. There is a drafting error in paragraph 7.32, page 51. It's a relatively important one because it changes the point. In terms of the final sentence, journey times within the charge area decrease under all models scenarios. So apologies for that. Isabel is now going to just try and bring a flavour to this in terms of a few slides. But clearly you'll want to consider this in your discussions, but we are deliberately just bringing a flavour to it rather than taking you through all of the background papers given the sort of weight, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you. So as Peter says, this paper pulls together a huge amount of evidence that has been collated on the subject, and I'm going to briefly go through that. I'm going to mostly concentrate on the evidence here that is new rather than absolutely everything, because the Joint Assembly has seen some of this previously. So the evidence covers a range of topics, and that includes evidence of the problem, evidence of the type and scale of intervention required, what improvements are needed in order to kind of tackle those issues, what measures could be used to deliver the improvements, and also engagement feedback, which is in addition to the previous paper on Citizens' Assembly. So this table is just a kind of brief summary, and you have this summary in your paper as well. So starting with the kind of evidence of issues and options, and this is the bit that I'm not going to spend so long on because much of this has been presented in particular in November and December 2018 and May and June 2019. But just to recap, we know that congestion is bad and it is going to worsen as the area grows. We've kind of said that if people travel as they are at the moment, then the 44,000 additional jobs coming to the area will mean about 26,000 more cars on the road. We've had a report from Ricardo looking at air quality in clean air zones, and the Cambridge University Science and Policy Exchange has done work for us on carbon emissions and their impacts, and both of those shows that kind of with the growth, transport's going to continue to be a significant contributor to poor air quality and to high levels of carbon emissions in this area. So the works we've done is looking at how can you kind of encourage people to use public transport, to cycle and to walk, and essentially you need to make it more competitive so that people have a really good alternative to travelling by car. The ARUP work that's outlined in the paper has shown that broadly 3 things are needed to deliver that competitiveness: investment in infrastructure, improvements to services, and a lever to create space for those services by managing the demand for car travel. We've done work jointly with county council officers looking at the scale of that intervention, and essentially that work says that you need a significant fiscal or physical measure in order to create the space needed for public transport, walking and cycling. And we've also brought together in this paper the lessons from other places that have been used throughout the project, but they're kind of brought together in one place here, including drawing on various European studies. What comes through from that is that the package of measures rather than the measures in and of themselves is what's really important, and also how it is phased so that people have choices is really important. So the first thing I wanted to cover in a bit more detail is the work looking at a future bus network. And this has been done to basically looking at kind of what would a competitive public transport network look like that would mean people had a real alternative to their car. So the work suggests 3 categories of improvement. A first kind of set of improvement on the current network would be to standardise the times and the frequencies and the hours of operation of the bus network, so it would kind of operate for longer hours throughout the day and have a regular service so that people could have confidence that in that bus network. A second phase would be to enhance that core network with additional services, in particular looking at orbital routes around the city. And a third category of improvements is improving rural services so that people are better connected into that core network. So if this full network was delivered, the Sistra network thinks that nearly 500,000 people will be within an hour of at least one of the key employment destinations. And some of those destinations see a really marked improvement. So if this network was delivered, about an extra 45,000 people would be within half an hour of the biomedical campus. So given that we know that the employment there is likely to grow quickly, that's obviously likely to be beneficial. The report also looks at a range of delivery challenges for this network. So it looks at kind of delivering a cleaner bus fleet because, as we've discussed already, kind of the air quality issues are such that you would want clean buses operating these additional services. It looks at space constraints within the city and essentially does a kind of rough calculation of if you were to deliver this network, you would need a lot of additional buses, and that would mean you need to take roughly 17.5% of cars off the road to get those buses in without kind of changing the traffic conditions. Obviously, we know in some areas you would want lower traffic levels in order to speed up those buses. And it also looks at the cost. The cost largely is about kind of your fare strategy and your recovery strategy. But if this network was operated on a similar basis to the London network, which is about an 82-83% of recovery rate of costs through fares, then it would be looking at costs of about £17 million a year to deliver the full network. So much of the other published work in the paper is then looking at those questions of space and revenue, so that the kind of improvements to public transport, cycling and walking can be secured. And we've undertaken modelling of theoretical options on both of these, so can understand the broad differences and impacts of different options. So in terms of the physical measures, which is something that Cambridge is familiar with, we have some physical measures in place already. And we've also committed to doing a spaces and movement supplementary planning document. What the modelling has looked at is comparing some strategic closures, so of particular roads or kind of changes to junctions, alongside a kind of widespread city centre-wide closure. And what the strategic closures show is that you get a benefit in the area that is closed. You get a small reduction overall, but you do get displacement and congestion elsewhere on the network. In contrast, doing a big kind of central area wide closure gives you a much larger traffic reduction, but does lead to some small increases elsewhere. The paper also looks at the early findings from the evaluation of a strategic closure, which is the Mill Road closure. There are caveats around that. In particular, obviously, while the road was closed, there was roadworks and there was also a major fire. Additionally, the monitoring is ongoing, but I think that the early findings are suggesting similar things in terms of some reduction in traffic, but displacement to other areas. Modelling's also been undertaken on the fiscal enabling measures. So 6 tests have been undertaken looking at both road pricing and parking pricing measures. So in terms of road pricing, this is looking at a charge to drive into or around an area. It's not a cordon. It's looked at charging in the morning only or throughout the day. And the charge results that are presented in this graph are looking at an exemption for ultra-low emissions vehicles, but there was also a sensitivity test looking at charges for all vehicles as well. In terms of the parking pricing, it's looking at a kind of a blanket charge applied to all parking, so effectively covering if you did a workplace parking levy and you increased the charge on all other parking on street and off street, and it's a charge per use. There are a lot of detailed findings in the report, but the main ones here are that in the morning peak, all options except the £5 charge will mean that traffic falls by more than 10% on 2015 levels. In the PM peak, only the £10 all-day charge reduces traffic by more than 10% on the 2015 levels. The reason it's 2015 is because 2015 is the base year in the model. Unsurprisingly, the £10 charge is more effective than the £5 charge, and road pricing is more effective than parking pricing, particularly in terms of vehicle kilometres that are gained. A key piece of new work as well is the preparation that's been done towards an integrated impact assessment. So an integrated impact assessment looks at several issues, so equalities, economic impacts, environmental, health and community safety impact. And so you can do those things separately, but by doing them together, it means that you can kind of see cross-cutting impacts and assess those as well. The work that's been done is the preparatory work, because we don't have a scheme yet, so this is the kind of pre-work, and that is looking at the baseline and the assessment approach, and also makes an individual assessment of each of the measures that are being considered. So it's important to remember then they're individual assessments, they're not looking at what it would be like as part of a package, but it gives you some important information in terms of potential impacts and potential kind of enhancements or mitigations that could be considered. So the last part of the paper then looks at phasing and implementation and next steps now that this comprehensive evidence base has been assembled and kind of wide-ranging public engagement, including the Citizens' Assembly, has been undertaken. And as I said before, there's a need to respond to the Citizens' Assembly recommendations. I think the key points here is that any plan would be phased. You need to have improvements to sustainable transport options first. That there is choice around the level of intervention and the measures used, and that partly comes back to your objectives and the principles that were set at the June meeting and how those are weighed up. Packages can look at things like enhancement and mitigation. In the medium term, there needs to be a kind of a balance in terms of the ambition and the level of space and the level of funding So that's one consideration. The paper does also set out some potential immediate interventions, and that builds on the idea of a phased approach and would also form an immediate response to the Citizens' Assembly and the opportunity to test approaches and increase alternatives ahead of a fuller package. So they're all points that you might want to cover in your discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you could turn your microphone off, please. First of all, thank you very much for a concise survey of the paper in front of us and the vast amount of evidence that lies behind it. I'd like to commend officers for managing to get that into 40 pages. Of course, pages 58 and 59 and 60 do cover the large number of appendices. Many, of course, we've seen before, but those with the date of 2020 on them can't have been out for very long. Now, I'm quite assiduous, and I have tried very hard to read the background papers. I particularly commend the integrated impact assessment that Isabel was mentioning towards the end. That's only 39 pages, so that's still work in progress. The lessons from elsewhere is also very enlightening. That's only 24 pages, well worth looking at. The Sistra Future Bus Network concept report, that's 225 pages, and I have to confess I haven't been able to read all those before today, but I'm sure it was adequately summed up for us. Now then, that brings us to the Vice Chairman, Councillor Bick. I didn't mean to be, insulting about the work he has done, because I am actually genuinely very impressed with the paper that he has put together. I will have a few things to say to it after he has spoken, but over to you, Councillor Bick.
Thanks very much, Chair. The document I'm speaking to is this separate sheet that I think has been left on the table for everyone, and the parts of that document in brackets are references to the report that Isabel has just presented. I'm proposing this recommendation following a number of discussions with various members of the Assembly. I was worried that out of this very comprehensive report that there is actually no recommendation for taking this project forward. Now I understand that is because the board has not yet agreed what should happen next. It's important, I think, and for many of the reasons that have been mentioned already this morning, it's important that momentum is maintained and that this doesn't just get shelved on the shelf of too hard. What this recommendation that I'm putting on the table does is attempt to fill the gap in a manner which does respond to the rich body of evidence that we've got in front of us. I want to make a number of points because I think this is an important moment as far as the Assembly is concerned. And maybe there won't be many other occasions where we have the opportunity to have a very decisive, important role on a project that's in front of us. So I want to make a number of points. The first is that moving this forward is integral to the city deal, to the purpose that the city deal was struck for. It's been said that congestion is none of the GCP's business. Now, I was there when the deal which underpins our work was negotiated, and that isn't so. Congestion is the flip side of the weak transport system we have in Greater Cambridge. Improving it was absolutely central to why the deal was negotiated and was then agreed by each of our partners and the government. We need all of our partners to keep their eyes on this ball. More recently than the city deal, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Economic report, which has already been referred to by someone else, it singled out Greater Cambridge's transport system as the single biggest obstacle to the region's economy and identified the GCP as the right body to tackle it. Our developing policy is not something to apologise for because it is expected of us. The second thing I want to say is that there is a need for the GCP's various projects to be properly joined up. There is an interdependence between them. Improving radial access to the city for public transport through schemes that have been through our agendas on Histon Road, Milton Road, and today Cambourne to Cambridge, and then South East Cambridge on other days, they will underachieve in an overall sense if they simply load more buses into an unchanged transport system in the city. The City Access project is perhaps the most widely depended on piece of the jigsaw, and a commitment to it does need to be made in parallel. Thirdly, there is a legitimate sense of urgency about this. The population of Greater Cambridge continues to expand. It has only one large urban centre to which a large proportion of jobs and trade and services naturally gravitate. Adopting a comprehensive strategy to deal with this has actually been necessary for 15 years or more. Other cities are now making the progress that we so far haven't. Simply on grounds of transport efficiency, an already bad transport system is going to get worse. But if you overlay on that the problems of air pollution and carbon emissions, which I think all of our partners are now recognising and categorising as an emergency, and then look at the evidence linking them to current transport patterns, then the matter becomes even more urgent. Making a step change on this touches health, touches climate change, the economy, people's livelihoods, and social inclusion. No wonder that's reflected in all the tests of public opinion and involvement that the GCP has carried out, not least the Citizens' Assembly that we've just heard about, and who cannot fail but be impressed by those calls for boldness and urgency. And then I think there is a consensus based on the data in this report that we need a major improvement in our bus services to provide a mainstream alternative to the car. To achieve this, we need both an income stream to subsidise the improved bus service, and when we've got that in place, a means of discouraging the car use that currently prevents the buses from getting through. And we also need to hasten the cleaning and greening of the buses. We need to take advantage of the new settlement to reclaim some of the highway space to make walking and cycling more attractive for residents, commuters and visitors. It's not just a domestic issue for people who live in the city. This won't work without an income stream, and it won't work without actively deterring car use. If the Cannes Metro eventually emerges, it will be in a later time frame, but the equation is not fundamentally different, as it would substitute for some of the bus services, but not all of them, and will likely need some form of the same income stream. This recommendation doesn't specify the type of demand management measures, but asks for the options to be prepared to enable all those various complicated trade-offs to be considered. I think we're all aware that one of our partners, the County Council, has expressed the fact that it's uncomfortable about some of the possibilities of the City Access project. I think it should be a concern of ours that positions are being taken on this without exposure to evidence. And I think it's something that inside the GCP we've been very careful not to depart from. Assumptions have been made of what people think is being proposed when actually no proposal has actually been made. There obviously needs to be a debate, not only with the County Council, but also with all of the partners in the Assembly, and most importantly of all, with the public. But in all logic, that debate needs to be based on what actual proposals are, not what people guess they might be. And the presence of evidence around that is absolutely vital. So we must get to that stage before it's right for anyone to cry wolf, and hopefully we won't get to that stage even then. And then finally, there is a suggestion, and I'm sorry, conversation doesn't go on in sealed compartments from what people read in the newspapers and hear about in the media. There is a suggestion that ideology or partisanship is motivating the GCP on this agenda. In fact, the GCP blends together an incredibly diverse membership. In terms of politics, no political party dominates that. It's led by evidence. It could never even ignore its impact beyond its own boundaries. Its businesses and its education and health institutions draw people from within Greater Cambridge, but also well outside it. So we can't ignore those implications ourselves. And the GCP's consultations deliberately include those travelling into Cambridge from well beyond our own footprint in Greater Cambridge. It is working with the other transport agencies to obtain the best fit of our related projects for a shared benefit. This is about widely held practical needs of an area which delivers much prosperity to the wider region and the country. It can do more, but it does need support. And I hope that we can put that kind of allegation of partisanship and ideology to bed through a broad conflection of those people supporting this recommendation when we finished the discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was quite an impressive speech, if I may say so. Do we have a seconder? Because I guess you're making that as an actual proposal for debate. So do we have a seconder? Can I invite you to reserve your right to speak shortly after I have now spoken? Because there were some... The county councillor was mentioned on a number of occasions, and as a county councillor, I feel I ought to say a few words. The first point I'd like to make is that those who commute into Cambridge take rational decisions in the choice of mode of transport that they take. I would also like to get onto the table a move away from any desire to penalise car drivers because they use their cars to get to work. And I'd just like to make a reference to one of the pieces of data that was supplied by one of our consultants. Currently, travel by car is a more competitive option than public transport based on overall generalized costs. So it's a rational decision that drivers make. I'm also minded, because you've heard me say this on many occasions, that when we invited someone from Transport for London to come to talk to us 5 years ago, he said quite specifically that, in his opinion, a congestion charge would not work for Cambridge because Cambridge did not have the critical mass, and it certainly didn't have universal access to a public transport alternative. However, I accept that that was 5 years ago, and the world has moved on since, and momentum is building. So, we'll take it with those caveats. With regard to charging for pollution control, for improving air quality, I think we heard already from one of our speakers earlier today that the impact on air quality of charging zones is mixed. It is true that air quality may improve in a central exclusion zone, but it often worsens outside thanks to displacement and longer journeys, and both of those factors add up to greater carbon emissions. Right, now we've been discussing demand management and congestion in Cambridge for decades, so it's clear there's been a governance failure. We haven't been able to tackle this, have we? And the Citizens' Assembly was very robust on the subject. It said if the local politicians can't sort this out, we should get rid of the lot of them. It was one of the most refreshing remarks to hear at the end of the Citizens' Assembly, and I very much enjoyed hearing that. It's, as Councillor Bick suggested, it's been put into the too hard to handle box. It's been left aside. What may be some of the reasons to account for that governance failure, though? And one of the things that occurs to me is that the residents of Cambridge City are a compact core of very articulate and outspoken individuals who are very, very well represented at all levels of government, whereas the diaspora of commuters in the ever widening travel to work area for Cambridge are a much more diffuse population, and they may feel they lack a common voice. Now, on a very practical note, it's worth pointing out that the County Council does believe passionately that it has the exclusive power to impose any form of road pricing in the county. And at the moment, it seems very unwilling to wish to allow that power to be used. Having said that, it's not just the Greater Cambridge Partnership that is exploring fiscal measures of demand management and indeed raising revenue. The Combined Authority is also exploring such questions, particularly for providing the financing of a local contribution towards the capital cost of the Cambridge Autonomous Metro, but also for the ongoing annual subsidy of an enhanced bus network, which the Combined Authorities advisors themselves recognise is a prerequisite or a supplement to make the Cambridge Autonomous Metro work. So there are many pressures on finding some sort of ongoing revenue stream, and I think we must all be cognizant of that. If you look at the paper on lessons from elsewhere, one thing comes across time and time again, which is that if you are going to countenance any form of fiscal intervention for congestion, it has to command widespread support. There have been areas of cities around the world where a congestion charge has been attempted, but it has failed for one reason or another, and other measures have had to be tried instead. Councillor Bick said that part of the problem is that many people have misconceptions as to what a congestion charge for Cambridge City might amount to. It's possible that a view is held both inside and outside the boundary of Cambridge City that it would be a charge on anyone entering from outside to get into Cambridge for the privilege of working here. Whereas, as in London, the residents of London have a 90% deduction on the congestion charge. So it could be that residents of Cambridge City would really welcome a congestion charge because they feel they wouldn't have to pay it, whereas those outside Cambridge City really fear a congestion charge because they feel it would fall on them disproportionately. I think it's very clear from the evidence that 50% of the traffic inside Cambridge City at peak times is local drivers, and many of them are making journeys of less than 2 miles, and there are public transport and active travel alternatives available to them. And I think everyone is clear that if there were to be any form of road pricing for Cambridge, it would have to apply equally to residents of Cambridge City and residents of any other district. It's also evident from the lessons from elsewhere that the exemptions are critical in making a success of any kind of a congestion charge system. So you have to be very, very careful who you start exempting. And obviously the first group of people who are, for whom exemptions are sort of fairly automatic are disabled people, vulnerable people, people for whom there is really no alternative. But you do have to be very careful, because the more exemptions you introduce, the more the equalities impacts become an issue. So let's get away from this view out there that a congestion charge for Cambridge would be a tax on those who live outside but have to pay a fee for the privilege of working in Cambridge. I have said this before, and I'll say it again, that we Conservatives have a much smaller word for a revenue-raising measure. We call it a tax. And in general, my personal feeling is that taxes should be as low as possible, and that unless there's a very good reason for introducing a tax, you should not introduce a tax. I believe there is a growing body of evidence that a charge for Cambridge may well be what will help us solve a lot of these problems. But let's not by any means take this as an automatic panacea. Oh, sure, yeah, I haven't finished yet. Yeah. It's said that politics is the art of the possible. I feel that there are very, very significant challenges ahead in pursuing this, but I am very much up for accepting those challenges. I just feel that as of now, Greater Cambridge is not yet ready for any form of road pricing. I'm happy to stand to be corrected on that. It's possible that a tipping point has either already been reached or will be reached very soon. And I think we witnessed that, a similar example of that last year, when very quickly the notion of a climate emergency became absolutely mainstream. And it could well be that the momentum behind tackling congestion in Cambridge has reached a similar sort of tipping point. It's possible that it has, and I hope that is indeed the case. So I have carefully studied the wording that Councillor Bick and colleagues have come up with, and I find myself able to support that proposal. And as I said, when in my immediate response to the speech he gave in introducing that, I felt it was a very impressive performance, and I commend the discussion to the Assembly on that basis. Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to let Nikki speak as seconder, and then we'll have the discussion.
Now it's working. I do want to thank the Chair for also supporting this motion here. Tim and I were sending emails backwards and forwards, and indeed emails were going backwards and forwards to all of my group members who sit on the GCP. And I just want to give an example of the delays in our current bus network, which is none other than the bus that Councillor Davey and I took to this morning, which didn't arrive. In fact, I think you were there from 10 to 9, and our bus was due to be arriving just after 9. It didn't arrive. The bus did arrive just up before 2:45. I got on the bus, I paid for a ticket, and they told me to get off the bus because the bus is no longer in service as it's 40 minutes late. It's been stuck in congestion, and so the bus is now cancelled. I need to wait for the next bus. Bit baffling, as I did have my ticket in my hand. But there we have it. But that is the reality that everybody is finding from outside the city, but also inside the city. You've got people being stuck on buses who are coming from South Cambs, etc., and the outskirts who need to come into work, and they're using the public transport, and they're getting stuck in that congestion, let alone the people who are inside the city trying to go elsewhere who don't have a bus service that is reliable enough to actually be able to use it, which is why people are using their cars, which is why the congestion is there. And you mentioned in your points about there might be a tipping point coming up. Well, we are in a climate emergency. We have both councils have declared it. South Cambs and the city have declared it, and I think the county council also. And the point is that we have heard from residents who are saying that our residents are suffering due to our pollution in our streets. So we do need to be doing something about it now, which is why I'm minded to think of the Citizens' Assembly and their point, which is saying be bold and act now. And that's what we must be doing. In order to improve our bus network, we need to be spending money on it. And that money has to come somewhere. And when we say we need to improve the bus network, we need to do it tomorrow. Not next year, not in 2025. It needs to be done as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, and not just to make sure that those lengthy bus journeys are no longer that lengthy, but the fares are better too. Because if we can make the bus network better and fairer for everybody, then it will no longer be the car that will be the choice. However, at the moment, we need to find that funds. And that's what this motion is saying. We're not saying about a congestion charge. We are saying we are looking for an income stream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Rachel had a list for me, but she's taken it away. Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Well, I was just going to relate my bus experience this morning as well. It took over an hour for my bus to travel for 5 miles from Fulbourn into the city centre to get the number 4 here. And what I was going to say was that unless you remove the congestion, you could have free fares, you could have a bus every 2 minutes, but if it takes over an hour to travel 5 miles, you are not going to get people onto public transport and out of their cars. It has to be done at the same time. The removal of the cars has to be done in order to get the buses to run on time so that you can attract people onto them, regardless of what the fares or the frequency are. I mean, I both travel by bus into town and I also use the car into town. It takes me, even in the rush hour, 20 minutes to get from Fulbourn into town. It takes over an hour on the bus. There is no way anyone is going to get out of their car onto public transport until we solve the congestion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. What I just want to say is, as home prices push people further and further out from their employment, our priority should be to enable them to live, shop, work, take their children to school without having dual car ownership. We're focusing quite a lot on the big developments around Cambridge, like Northstowe, Camborne, but also there's smaller piecemeal development in villages which are increasing the numbers of people living there, and we need to look at those places as well to make sure that they too can have easy access to work without dual car ownership. Dual car ownership is very expensive and comes on top of their expensive housing. So that is just an added cost of living that we should be careful not to impose on people. If this is not done quickly, those houses are being built, the people are living there, they're buying their 2 cars so that they can carry on living and working and shopping and taking their children to school. And once they have got those cars and they have paid for them, they will be using them. So we need to stop that now. In particular, I've been looking at this paper on page 41, figure 8, we have the existing bus network, and it's quite obvious there are villages that have no direct access to stations. These are people who are possibly living here because they like living out of London, but who might work in London. But if they want to commute, they have to have a car. Then if we look at figure 10 on page 42, we have these yellow lines of rural enhancements. What are these rural enhancements? Because these are the things that are going to be joining villages and towns much more efficiently. So really, my overall point is that we need to think about the people who are being pushed out of the centre of Cambridge, who have to have cars to travel around. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Heather Williams next.
Thank you. It can get a bit confusing. So I think actually, on the whole, you're not going to get disagreement from most of the councillors here on what the objectives. I do have reservations about the congestion charging. I don't feel that we're at that point. I think there's a lot more else that can be done, and in the report we've got some quick wins, sometimes simple things. I think there are potential other revenue streams out there. I do believe that it will come at some point, but today's not the day, and I would actually encourage, particularly councillors, because we can get on our high horses a bit, that actually we try and separate the debate on that, because I think if we took that out of the debate now and looked at the other issues where we are united, we could make a lot more progress than when we include this sort of elephant in the room. And so I would suggest that we look at everything else possible before going down the road. And essentially, you know, the county council are the only, not to my understanding, legal body that can actually introduce this fee, unless the mayor might have powers soon, who knows. Yeah, so that I would just encourage, particularly the politicians' room, to leave that element of the debate out of it, and let's be productive in getting on with what we can agree on.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, I think, on your maiden contribution to our proceedings, and a very worthwhile one it was too. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to get confused with lots of Williamses and all sorts of things. I found myself in some degree agreeing with the Tims, both Tims. I agree with our Chair that levy, charge, income stream, you know, in shorthand, that could be called a tax. And when businesses think about it, it's a business tax, because essentially it's businesses who have all the people coming in the morning and who pay it. But what a remarkable thing we saw. If we got through our forest of papers and looked at the document, they came from Cambridge Ahead, Cambridge Network, and the Chamber of Commerce, representing businesses both within Cambridge and much wider, in support of what we might call a business tax, but you may call all the words you might want to use on that. So in terms of tipping points and what's acceptable, those businesses have decided that this is so important that we need to do something. And we need to do something now. That is the tipping point. The tipping point has been reached for business. And I'm not going to go through all those arguments. The paper's fantastic. So why have they come to that conclusion? One is it's a testament of the work the GCP have done. So business reps on the GCP is an unusual format. They don't sit on the county council. The representation of the combined authority is one step removed. The strengths and weaknesses of that, businesses shouldn't be having a vote on things which affect the general public, but having a business perspective and a business view is what's required sometimes to move things forward. So it's a testament to the work that the officers have done. It's also based on evidence. There's nothing businesses like more than evidence. We still need more evidence when we come back in June. Hopefully with this proposal, it's not to say we're going to do these measures, but until we look at what it looks like and what it might mean, we don't have that full package of evidence. So I could be swayed either way, but I'd like to see that conclusion of that work. We need a long-term strategy. We can't do quick wins without knowing where we're going to. So I am supportive of the recommendation. If there's a way that we could all second the recommendation, Councillor Massey, we should all be seconding it rather than voting for it. And to answer a much earlier question, yes, we do support active travel.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was trying to work out whether I have the power to invite everyone in the room to second the motion, but I'll come back to that. I'll get advice, no doubt, from Democratic Services. Yes, Helen.
Thank you. Much of what I want to say has already been said, but I think 3 quick points that strike me. I think this is really good paper. We've now got loads and loads of evidence. The evidence, it seems to me, is very clear that in order to get better bus service, we need an income stream. And in order to get an income stream, we need to start some form of charging. And that's not the only reason I support some form of charging. That's the only way that we're also going to get a substantial reduction in the amount of traffic. It seems to me, I've been on the Assembly since the beginning, there's been a big shift in public opinion in that time, partly because things have got worse, and I think partly because lots of other places are already onto this and seem to me to be doing it faster than us. And one of the things the Citizens' Assembly said that we wanted to be was the best. Well, there was an Observer article this weekend where there's half a dozen or more cities who seem to have come from a standing start to a likely implementation before we get there. And we're not going to be the best, we're going to be the worst at this rate if we don't take this seriously. And clearly business opinion has shifted as well. So I'm very much in favour of us progressing, working up options and find it quite difficult at this point to see that I wouldn't be wanting to support an option that included charging. And I think we are encouraged by the Citizens' Assembly to be bold, be brave, take action, and I personally do think the tipping point has already been passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your point about other cities overtaking us has reminded me that one of the lessons from elsewhere was Oxford City, and we all, picking up the ancient rivalry between the two ancient universities, we always used to think we were way ahead of Oxford in the way we tackled all our collective problems, but Oxford, I think, is a little ahead of us on this one. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Again, simply to initially by saying to support Tim and the proposals made, and to welcome the other Tim's support as well as the Chair. I think the key bit for me is it's about evidence, and therefore that should drive the decision making that we undertake. And I would therefore hope that the County Council does appreciate this is based on evidence as opposed to ideology, in the same way that if there were issues we wanted to address in Welney Washes that impact upon Cambridge, we would follow the evidence about what should be done in relation to other parts of the county. The second point I'd like to make really is about road closures. Going back again to the Citizens' Assembly, that was the priority given to the activities that the Citizens' Assembly wanted to undertake. And building upon what's been said about elsewhere, York and Birmingham have already committed to undertaking a programme of road closures. My own home city of Edinburgh has been doing it for some time. And Edinburgh has many similarities to Cambridge in terms of its attraction to tourism, and also it's an actual place that people go to work on a daily basis from outside. There appears to be no reasons why road closures should not be given a greater priority. And I note in Tim's proposal the bullet point 4 does make reference to that. I suppose my plea is that it's more than just Silver Street, which is the only road closure that's announced in the actual paper. And I think, bearing in mind what the Citizens' Assembly has said, and bearing in mind the way Cambridge operates, I think there are other places that we could look at in a more detailed way to look at road closures, which I suspect might be a shorter-term solution and a cheaper solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walkinshaw.
Chair, thank you very much indeed. Really in danger of repeating everything else. At the heart of this is an excellent report and a lot of work that's been done by the officers over time. This all had a very difficult starting sort of gestation period, but it has moved forward a long way. We have seen, I think, the tipping point approached. Whether we've passed it, we're very close to it, certainly. Certainly the business community agrees completely with the Citizens' Assembly that, that we need to get on with it, and that the solution will include, inevitably, things that individually we are uncomfortable or find a bit tricky from time to time. Right now, we don't have proposals in front of us as to exactly what that should be. I think it's really important that those proposals now come forward as soon as possible, and that everything should be on the table so that we can look at that and understand exactly what we're being asked to support. But it has to go forward. Therefore, I completely support A, the report, B, Councillor Bick's proposal, and welcome your positive comment, which includes many things that many of us would agree with on an individual basis as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Wells, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At the danger of repetition again, I mean, tremendous evidence base, and my compliment to the officers on assembling that. And I think it's a compelling case. Compelling case to do exactly what we need to work out, but it's a compelling case to do something. What comes through very clearly, I think, is we have historically talked about congestion, and very powerfully in these papers, and this is perhaps as the issue has evolved, we now have at least a three-legged problem. We have congestion, we have air quality, and we have greenhouse gases. We have a three-legged problem to solve, and they will be solved. In solving them, there will be, as others have said, there will be difficult trade-offs. Some, you know, all of us will have to give up something for the greater good. There will be trade-offs. There is no, one should not expect a free ride to solve the problem. And so all of us will need to face that. But the danger, I think, is that we attempt to cherry-pick the easy recommendations and avoid the difficult ones. Because, as others have said, getting this right is really a system problem. There's no point having, you know, people speeding towards the centre of Cambridge on excellent public transport to only sort of arrive at some 1 mile from the centre place where everything is completely congested, for example. It has to be worked as a system. So the trade-offs have to be dealt with up front, I think, as part of that design. We've talked about tax or other words, but we should never forget that there is a cost of doing nothing. People sitting in traffic jams cost the economy money. So we are already paying a tax of a sort. So this is not about really imposing new charges. It's a way of them being more obvious, but economically it's not clear to me that it is in fact a new cost. In fact, by charging something, we might reduce overall costs to the economy overall. So I would thoroughly endorse Councillor Bick's proposal. I absolutely endorse the Assembly's view that we should be bold. And I would close by saying, shame on us if it takes a 16-year-old from the north to tell us in a year or two's time that we've failed to respond to the challenge. That's what's happened on climate change. After 20 years of inaction, a 16-year-old from the north has suddenly woken people up. Shame on us if we wait for the same thing to happen on this issue.
Thank you very much. Heather Richards.
Thank you. Reiteration of a lot of the comments were made in absolute support of the proposal by Councillor Bick. Again, I guess a reiteration that the time to act is now. I think we're past that point. And hearing from both the Citizens' Assembly as well as the evidence and business representatives, of which I am one, I think we're actually all in agreement. What else do we need, I think, to support that action should be happening now? One concern I have about just falling back, though, on quick wins is, as the first step, is I think we absolutely have to make sure that any quick wins discussed are linked to an overall strategy with outcomes attached to them. That there's language in the papers that talks about proof of concepts or pilots, for example. Those absolutely have to be linked then to success criteria and recommendations linked to if these proposals or success or proof of concepts are successful, what then happens next? And I think that's really key. Just a comment about road closures. When I first saw the paper and it mentioned the couple of road closures that were being suggested almost as pilots or quick wins, it sort of made me laugh because I thought those were the ones that were already closed most of the time. So I think actually, if possible, for the next meeting, if there could be some actual evidence around outcomes of specific road closures that could be looked at beyond just the ones that are listed in the quick win, I think that would be really compelling. And also just wanted to mention, I've talked to quite a few people who have lived in Cambridge for a very long time. I mean, I've been here for over 20 years, but I have friends who have been here longer than that. And they were all recollecting, I guess in support of a lot of what was said during the Citizens' Assembly, that they remembered when Market Square was closed to traffic, or first open and then closed. And initially what a public outcry there was going to be, and people thought, my God, how am I going to take my kids to school? We recovered, we got over it, we all moved on. Now is absolutely the time to do something that I think people individually may be taken aback, you know, to start off with, but is going to be the right decision to move a lot of these things forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solomon?
Thank you, Chair. I will keep it brief because I share many of the sentiments that have been expressed about this particular proposal by the Vice Chair. What I would like to say, though, I was sparked to speak by what Dr. Wells raised about trade-offs. And to really understand how trade-offs work, you have to have some coherent alternatives and different alternatives that could be a winner, that can compete. So I would like to see not just one recommendation, single recommendation polished, but actually maybe two, maybe three, however many is appropriate to be able to understand, so we can understand those trade-offs and make a good decision about what we recommend to the board, or what the final recommendation to the board is. So it's a bit of a process point. And I mean, to give an example on that, I mean, I'm quite interested in the Sistra stuff. There was potential for new park and ride provisions. It's talked about in the papers. A lot of people are concerned about how that potentially impacts on the provision of a future rural network, and how does that undermine the support for the extensive rural network that we really, really want in South Cambridgeshire. So that's just one example. There are many others, but fitting it all together as a coherent package of how much we do of different things, I think is really important, having alternatives around that. Thank you.
That's a really good point, Councillor Solomon, and I'm sure the officers heard that loud and clear. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just bringing in the education perspective from this, which I think is quite similar in terms of the business perspective. We know that particularly in the further education sector, that apprentices and students, for example, find transport one of their key barriers to taking on, for example, an apprenticeship job. And therefore, taking into account some of the other requirements of the GCP and the City Deal and some of our other aspirations in terms of skills, it really is paramount that we look at that holistic view that really does give people opportunities for the future and contribute to the economy. I think with that in mind, I'm certainly very supportive of Tim's recommendations. The key from our perspective is that timescale is paramount, so we're looking at these are a set of broad approaches that should be defined into detailed plans that are taken back to the next Assembly meeting, and that's really what we'd be looking for from the board. And I think picking up on Dr. Wells' point that those quick wins really must link into that long-term strategy. So I think as an Assembly, we should be looking for those detailed plans that link to the long-term strategy that can then be recommended at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Kavanagh, you've been very patient. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Yeah, no, I fully support Tim Bick's statement and welcome Nikki's endorsement on that as well. The thing I'd like to raise is and I'm very pleased to hear the word bold again and again around the table. And something that is bold, has been happening. Those who are in the city will be aware of the initiative to bring in the residence parking schemes. And we've got a category here on page 53 where there are roll-out controlled parking zones across Cambridge City. And it has taken a lot of boldness on the part of local politicians to drive through the residence parking schemes. And they have been driven through, terrible phrase to use, but on quite slim majorities and quite slim participation. But those that have been implemented have been done on a majority vote by local residents. And I'm also very grateful to the GCP for providing the finance for the implementation, the setting up of the residence parking schemes. And in my area, Coleridge West, we've had ours in operation now for about a year, and I can say this now without contradiction, that even residents who voted against the scheme are actually very, very pleased with the positive outcomes. And they talk about, yes, it's a lot less polluted around here. The congestion's cut down. We don't have these commuters, scrabbling for places throughout the day. Now, I'm moving on to a little negative thing. It's been revealed to me, because I had another scheme we've had an informal consultation in Romsey West, and the residents there were wanting the scheme to go to the next stage, and the county council parking team have been working very hard to get a very good comprehensive survey put together so that residents will feel involved and have an ownership on what the final residence parking scheme will look like. And that is the key to getting agreement, getting the involvement, the kind of ownership of what's going to happen on your streets. Well, unfortunately, I've just been picking up that further progress, further implementations of residence parking schemes have been put on hold. Now, I don't understand why that is, and I could put it down possibly to the fact that there are so many councils involved in the initiatives that we're all, in all honesty, trying to implement, to make Cambridge the city that we're all striving for here. Cut the pollution, cut the congestion, make moving around easier, change modal shift. So maybe someone around here has got an answer to my question. Why have the residence parking schemes developments been put on hold, and who has made that decision? Sorry to sound negative, but it's so important that these schemes, I think, proceed, because they are part of the big picture of what we're all trying to achieve.
We're going to get you an immediate answer on that final question, and then I'll sum up the discussion.
So, Chair, I'm not party to that information, but I will take an action to liaise with county colleagues and report back. Yeah, I'll leave it with me, and I will get an answer.
In fact, Councillor Bick wants to sum up to his, what you might call a motion. Yeah.
I just wanted to say two things. One is to thank the people who've given input to the recommendation, because it's proposed by me, but it's had input from lots of others. And the second thing is that I think I discern some inclination to unanimity here. We'll see. But sometimes I'm reflecting on my own attitude to that. Sometimes you feel you're not saying anything very important if everyone's saying it anyway. But actually, I think this is in a situation in which it really matters that we do try and speak with one voice, and we all represent that diversity I referred to. And I think all of that is very important in what we say.
Yeah, go quite kind. Okay, I haven't heard anyone speaking against this, so I'm presuming we're all going to be in favour, and I think it might be quite effective if we give a show of hands on this, and you know, let's see whether we are indeed unanimous. So all those in favour, please show. Hope the cameras are rolling, because that's quite a significant event. Thank you very much, members. Okay, I think we gave that a very, very good discussion. I'm grateful to all of us for contributing to that. Okay, right, so on to Greenways. Thanks everyone who contributed to that previous item, by the way, much appreciated. So Greenways, we're going to take public questions, and then we're going to hear officer responses, then we're going to receive the report, and then we're going to have the debate. So I'm going to start with a question from CamCycle. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. So yes, members, including me, please speak close to the microphone. Thank you. So first question is from CamCycle.
Hello. Members of CamCycle are happy to see the proposals for the Greenways and the request for additional funding, and we hope that the Joint Assembly will support these plans, as the Greenways cannot arrive a minute too soon. Our questions. The first, in light of the climate emergency, we ask the Joint Assembly to consider what steps could be taken to speed up delivery of the Greenways sooner than the proposed date of late 2024. Second question, in another project, the GCP has proposed removing all car parking along Adams Road. Given that this is a desirable safety feature on its own, may we ask for the removal of parking and addition of traffic calming on Adams Road to be included as another quick win project that can be implemented straight away to increase cycling safety on one of the busiest and most important cycle routes in Cambridge. And while I have more of my time, may I ask question the third, which unfortunately didn't get submitted as requested.
Oh, I will let you go on.
Excellent. We've got the people in the room I hope we need for it. So our third question is that given the relocation of the County Council, the restructuring of the cycling projects team, the loss of the key leader, Mike Davies, of the cycling projects team, can we have some reassurance that we're going to have the local skills and knowledge needed to implement these projects, because it is that local knowledge that is so vital to making the Greenways work. So some reassurance on that would be grateful for.
Right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions of clarification? No, okay, you're free to go. That leads me to invite Jim Chisholm, venerable contributor to all of these discussions. Thank you for joining us again.
Right, thank you. Well, first of all, I should say I'm just some old bloke from the north. He's got a copy of the Smead report on his shelves, which is the 50-year-old report on road pricing. And I've been coming to these committees here for 20 years to try and convince you of that. So now my question. So I'm here yet again requesting cycle infrastructure that in this case would cost peanuts and would benefit many who already cycle, especially to school, but also many who would cycle if only they had safe and pleasant routes. I've read reports about Greenways and was puzzled and disappointed at the lack of commitment to complete the improvements to the 6-kilometre route from Sawston through Stapleford and Shelford to the rapidly expanding biomedical campus. We've already upgraded some 2 kilometres to 3+ metres wide as part of the quick wins, and a further 1.5 kilometre of the Genome Path, which may well need changing as part of this Cambridge South Station East-West Rail programme. But we have about 2.5 kilometres of short linking sections on busy minor roads with limited visibility on bends, a difficult road crossing, a section directly adjacent to a busy main road with an effective width of as little as 400 millimetres. That's that much. And a much-used crossing that isn't a toucan, and even a section of footway where cycling appears not to be legal. The traffic-free alternative, including the original consultation, says 450 metres of redundant rail land with agreed permission to the south of Shelford Station and a 700-metre route on land adjacent to the new agricultural reservoir with a cooperative owner. All that is needed for an excellent route to be completed is the remaining 450 metres adjacent to the rail line. Apart from a possible delay over land issues, this should be another quick win. Let us get it done for the benefit of all those school children, and before developments on the biomedical campus, the genome campus and the old Spices site double the cycling flows here. Why cannot it be progressed now?
Thank you very much. Any questions or clarification? No? Thank you. You're free to go. And do we have Linda Worth here? Oh, yes? Thank you very much. Yes. The middle one, yes. The red light will come on the microphone. Yes,
Okay,
you're on
good.
it. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. First of all, I'm a car driver, I'm a cyclist, and I'm a horse rider. I'm here to raise awareness of the danger created by the first Greenway and the impact of transport decisions on the safety of horses, their riders, and on the countryside. The Cambridgeshire Rights of Way Improvement Plan admits that the bridleway network is fragmented, inadequate, and in need of improvement. As a result, horse riders are obliged to travel between communities to access safe off-road rights of way. We were assured that the first Greenway section between Sawston and Stapleford would include equestrians. Councillor Bates announced it as such at the opening and in the press release, but the multi-user status was rescinded following a post-construction road safety audit. Why was this outcome not foreseen and mitigated? Horses are now consigned to the narrow bridge shown in my written statement and to the traffic flow on the A1301, dangerously sandwiched between fast-moving traffic on their outside and potentially fast-moving two-way traffic on their left-hand side. Routes deemed unsafe for cyclists, but they have the Greenway. Moreover, horse riders have been told that they must contribute funds for any remedial work to mitigate the situation. The equestrian community has engaged fully with the Greenways consultations. I sit on the GCP NMU working group, yet this Greenway is a total disaster for equestrians. Horse riders have been misled and disadvantaged. Reassured we would be included, we did not object. By the time we were excluded, it was too late to object. Byway 4 Rampton is a grassy rural, or was a grassy rural byway linking local bridleways, but has recently been completely resurfaced with SMA, a surface known for over 20 years to be slippery and lethal in wet and icy conditions. This surface obstructs the right-of-way for equestrians. Riders avoid it or risk an accident as horses are slipping on the surface. It has been admitted that the high volume of horses which use the byway were not taken into consideration. Both these projects were delivered as a quick win by the cycle delivery team, whose remit and expertise is the creation of cycleways. We supported the Greenways as a network of multi-user routes. We did not and will not support the further fragmentation of a safe off-road network, nor the roadification of rural paths which impact negatively on rightful beneficiaries, equestrians, runners, dog walkers and the environment, in order to create cycle superhighways for speeding cyclists who endanger the safety of all those rightful groups. It was stated in Parliament that the LC-WIS refers to all vulnerable users, including equestrians. It follows that the funding for LC-WIP schemes should extend to funding provision for all vulnerable users. Other than in central city areas, the GCP is requested to ensure that 1, delivery of the Greenway projects is by a team with the expertise, remit and funding to create inclusive multi-user routes so that no group is excluded, and the amenity and characteristic of rural routes and the environment are protected.
Thank you very much. Some quite salient points there. Any questions of clarification? Yes, Heather?
Press it again.
Being a new member, apologies if this is something that the Assembly's already gone through before. You mentioned some issues with the current scheme. Is there anything in particular with we've got the 2 proposals, Waterbeach and Fulbourn, in the documents today, any particular areas en route that is of concern to yourself?
I'm really sorry. I was only very recently made aware of what's happening today, and I haven't had the opportunity to actually to read it, so I'm not able to answer your question.
Right then, but thank you for asking that question. Anyone else then? Okay, you're free to go, thank you. So if we could start with Peter responding to those questions.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the CAM cycles question, the programme is based on a realistic time frame on our experience of acquiring land, principally. But we understand the sense of urgency in terms of the questioning, and where and when we can deliver faster, we will seek to do so. Adams Road is subject to another report this afternoon. It would be appropriate to hear that report for the Assembly and Board to take those decisions before we decide what to do next. In terms of Jim Chisholm's question, we are already working on the Sawston Greenway proposals. They will come back to this group and then to Executive Board later this year. Thank you very much for the information that will be fed in. And the same, I think the same issue around that sense of urgency. If we can deliver things sooner, then we will seek to do that. Pardon me. In terms of Linda and the sort of the final points around British Horse Society, we recognise the need of all users, and that needs to be reflected in our proposals. So picking up on the final comment by the councillor, we will ensure that there is engagement as we develop these two schemes to ensure that happens. We will preserve existing amenity, and road safety assessments do take account of all users. The outcome of that and the appropriateness we will need to work through with stakeholders, and we give assurance that we'll continue to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think you're going to introduce the report as well.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few short comments by way of presentation, not least because my voice is going. Essentially two key parts to this presentation. The first part is, and as we've discussed previously around the Greenways programme, it would be inappropriate, whilst we've done the work on the initial assessments on all 12 Greenways, to plonk them all in terms of one report. And what Appendix 1 tries to do is just to give a sense of a running order, and a sort of a rationale behind that. So that isn't to say that schemes further down will not come forward. It's just a case of that's the batting order that we'll bring them forward in that sense. And then we are looking at outline proposals here for Waterbeach and Fulbourn. They're based on the consultation and the pre-consultation that has taken place. There will be much more of that going forward as we develop the detailed designs, and you can expect to see more of these reports as we get into a development and delivery phase, Chair. Obviously happy to take any questions.
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I of course welcome the Greenways, and I think it's a really great initiative. But I'm very disappointed with the Fulbourn Greenway. The reason for it is, if you look on page 70 of the report, at the table at the top, you'll see that the Greenway stops short of Fulbourn Village. It stops at the end of Fulbourn Old Drift. Now, when we had the consultation, it was proposed that the junction of Fulbourn Old Drift and Hinton Road, which is a very dangerous junction for cyclists and pedestrians, would be improved. And also between there and to the centre of Fulbourn, there would be a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and signage would be increased. Now, it's not mentioned in this report at all. And the reason for that, I would like to read out the Fulbourn Primary School's response to the consultation, because I think this really sums up the feeling that this, without these things, so far as Fulbourn is concerned, the Greenway would be unsafe for cyclists to use. And it's the school. We welcome the proposals to improve infrastructure for those wishing to travel between Fulbourn and Cambridge by bike. The school already faces significant challenges with traffic around drop-off and pick-up times, and this will only increase with the proposed development of between 250 to 275 dwellings at the Ida Darwin Hospital site set out in the South Cambridgeshire Local Plan, which falls within our catchment area and is approximately 1.5 miles from the school. So you'll see on the map that that actually the Greenway would have linked Ida Darwin with the school, but we're now not proposing to do that. Effective measures to make cycling safer and more appealing for our pupils and their parents will benefit our school and our community through not only the health benefits of cycling itself, but also the potential reduction in traffic on the school run, which will reduce air pollution and improve road safety. But the very section that they're talking about has been taken out of the Greenway project. So, as I say, I can't support this in its present form. I think it's essential that the Greenway continues through Thornbourne Village to the centre of the village to enable us to improve cycling and indeed encourage cycling, not only for the school, but for people who are accessing Thornbourne High Street. I mean, it may have been a mistake that it's got missed off, I hope so, but at the moment, the way I cannot support what's in this report.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I want to talk about the Waterbeach Greenway. This has been with the people in the village of Waterbeach a very popular project, and it has a lot of local support. The A10 is currently at capacity, and the Greenway would provide a healthier alternative for the people of Waterbeach to go about their daily business. I've been approached by one of the elected members for Waterbeach who is aghast at the fact that this isn't likely to be on functioning until 2024, 4 years. If you look at the timeline on page 76 of the paper, and one of the things I note, having noted that the Oakington Greenway has been held up by negotiations over land acquisition, I'm wondering why the land negotiations are starting so late on the Waterbeach Greenway. So what I really want to say is Waterbeach, the residents would like to have the Greenway now. The Waterbeach New Town will be starting to be built out, so there'll be even more demand for this Greenway. And just, is there any way that this could be brought forward so it doesn't wait until 2024? Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. Just on the Waterbeach one, I was on planning committee here, so I don't know if I have to declare an interest on that or anything to the application. And actually, the Greenway project to Waterbeach was a key part of our deliberation. It was really important and fundamental to the transport links for the new town, and I think for the village as well. So I would definitely like to see that sooner, and it might surprise Councillor John Williams that I am supportive as well if what he says is about the Fulbourne access doesn't actually go to the village. So I'd like a bit of clarification from officers, if I can, around the comments that have been made, because I'm not as familiar with the area obviously as himself. But it does seem that if you're going to the expense of doing this, it really should service those areas and places like the school.
Yes, Councillor Kavanagh.
Thanks. Yeah, the Greenways initiative is it's just a fantastic addition to the cycle routes for the city of Cambridge and beyond, the settlements within the greater Cambridge boundaries. But I'd like to see this initiative, the Greenways initiative, as a kind of inspiration for the rest of the county. Because some of you might be aware that I have this role as a cycle champion, cross-party role for Cambridgeshire. And as I go around to the market towns and villages around Cambridgeshire, cycling a lot of the time, I'm just made aware of the need for safe cycling routes across the whole county to join up settlements to the larger conurbations. So there is a suppressed demand out in Cambridgeshire. I know it's not directly relevant to GCP, but GCP has, I think, provided an inspiration for developing networks further afield in the county. Thanks.
Thank you very much. No, it's a point well made. Thank you. Councillor Solomon.
And I mean, following on from that, I think generally the Greenways schemes have been found favour in the consultations. I guess I would urge us, in light of what Councillor John Williams brings up with this particular proposal, that we're not scoring own goals in terms of our engagement with the communities and what they expect from a consultation and what actually comes forward. A small technical point. It was quite useful to have the batting order in that sense. The explanation for that, there was a link to it, it didn't work. And so I didn't actually find out what the explanation was. I would have been quite interested to read it. And then just picking up on the final question as well. It certainly came up in the consultation quite a lot in other of the Greenways project that I took a close interest in, of the need for appropriate surfacing. And I wasn't aware of the importance of that for the equestrian community as well. But I think having a surface that it's important that it's right for cyclists, but it's important that it's right for other users, and it's important that it's in keeping with the setting of the Greenways. And I think let's not just go for the cheapest, easiest to maintain. Let's build these at really high quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, so Peter, if you could respond to those points, and in particular, there seems to be a lot of concern about what Councillor John Williams has raised.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor John Williams is quite correct, and our own goal is not drafting the paper to reflect that. So they are included, and we will amend that as it goes to Executive Board. So hopefully that allays some concerns. I think the water beach point is the same point that Cam Cycle were suggesting in terms of this sense of urgency. I do have to say land negotiations take a deal of time, and actually to commence them in earnest, you need a decision point. And the decision point will be the Executive Board, which will allow us to do that. Nevertheless, we will take the challenge to deliver this as soon as we realistically can. And I think the final point by Councillor Solomon, design and design principles, is an important point that's well made. And we need to continue that actually in all of our schemes. And some of our experience in things like Histon Road will need to be replicated in the Greenways work in terms of the design, what it looks like and how local communities view it.
So, members, having heard that, if you look on page 66, you'll see what the Executive Board is going to be asked to consider. Are we all comfortable in allowing that to happen? I haven't heard anyone challenging it. We've had a few clarifications, but no one is contesting those recommendations. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. And that brings us now to the quarterly progress report. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, about who's going to take over from Mike Davis. Well, I'm not sure. Peter, do you know? Can you say who's going to take over?
Yes, we agree. Local knowledge is important, in part linked to the very last point Councillor Solomon made about design principles and things like that. And GCP will commit to ensuring that people who design these schemes understand and know Cambridge as we take it forward.
I shared with Mr Davis before he left the best wishes of all members of the Assembly and the Executive Board. Of course, he's not leaving Cambridge altogether, and as Transport Director for the University, I'm sure he will continue to be very actively involved in sustainable transport. But I'm sure he leaves a very strong legacy of officer training at the County Council. So I think we can be confident that the projects that he initiated will be carried through successfully. Okay, sorry about all that. On to item 9 then, the quarterly progress report. And we're going to receive an overview on this from Rachel. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious of the time and that the lunch break beckons, but just wanted to highlight a couple of things for Assembly members on our quarterly progress report. So we are planning to take a few specific requests to the board as part of this report, and they're set out for you at section 1.1. on page 78. The first one is to confirm part funding of a pilot which is aimed at testing modern methods of construction. This is to provide 6 temporary housing units for homeless residents, but for us it's actually about how you can build units using new innovative means, but also bringing forward apprenticeships, and the Skills Working Group has been very supportive of this initiative because it's actually one of those sweet spots where it actually supports both our housing and our skills work streams. So we'll be asking the board to support funding of £70,000 towards that, and we're hoping that installation should begin shortly. The second issue is just, you'll recall that the Assembly saw a very lengthy transport study into the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and there was an action plan which you and the board asked us to prioritise. It's just to note that progress is being made on that action plan, and support us to continue to do that. The third area is that a couple of years ago we worked with the County Council to give funding that would mean that there was a parking charge at park and ride sites could be removed. We gave 2 years funding, which is sort of up in March. We're proposing that that continues for an extra 12 months. That will be a proposal to the board, which will be at a cost of £531,000 for that additional year. I think the board will probably want to ask that an integrated parking strategy is considered during that 12 months in order to determine how costs can be sustained into the future. The Assembly's views on that would be welcome. Otherwise, I just wanted to highlight that this is obviously the annual occasion where you are agreeing the budget for 2021. Chris Mallion, who looks after our finances, is here if there are any detailed questions about that. Because we changed meetings due to the general election, the budget is being considered slightly earlier towards the end of the financial year. So it might be that there are some tweaks that happen before the end of March, but we are not envisaging anything substantial. So what you have in the papers is the position as best we know it. Otherwise, this report is obviously giving you an overall sense of performance against all the work streams. I did just want to highlight actually the success of the target that we have on apprenticeships. So we have discussed here a number of times about how are we able to measure and monitor whether we've hit that 420 magic number that was in the original City Deal document. From national performance reporting, we are saying that from July last year we did actually pass that number, which is really good news. In addition to that, we've now had 12 months of running a new Greater Cambridge Apprenticeship Service, so that we can actually make a more direct correlation between our investment and the success of apprenticeships. And I think it's worth noting that an additional 127 apprenticeships have already been supported during that first year of operation. The only red that I wanted to flag to you in all of the sort of RAG assessments was that Milton Road is at a red, but just to remind you that that is because I think with your support the board took a decision that that scheme should not start until the completion of Histon Road, so that's why the timeline for Milton Road is showing red. Otherwise, happy to take any questions.
Now, members, at the last meeting, we took an hour and a quarter over this report. I just remind you that you're eating into your lunch break now, and I have 4 speakers, starting with Councillor Massey.
Okay, I'll be very brief. I just wanted to alert that the part fund pilot of the MMC project for the 6 temporary housing units is in my ward in Abbey. So just to flag that up, but of course I wholly support. But also just to add the concern of the 531,000 of lost income and the sustainability of the GCP paying that money to the County Council. And although I don't have an answer, I'd be interested to hear what other people's thoughts are on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davey.
Mine's a straightforward question, you'd be delighted to know. It's related to the apprenticeships. Obviously delighted 127 have been signed up. The issue is more about, whilst 129 employers may well have said they would consider, how many actually have undertaken the apprenticeships, which I think would be a better flavour, because whilst a lot of employers I know do consider doing it, not all actually do it, if that makes any kind of sense. So the figure I'd like to see is how many employers have actually taken apprentices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, on page 88, if you look at the cross-city cycle improvements, you see that it says that links to East Cambridgeshire and NC N11 and Fen Ditton have been completed, and then you have a little note which says actually it's substantially completed. A minor path, well actually it's not minor at all. It's quite a major part of the project. It involves taking a bank away, and there seems to be some discussion over how that should be done, and that's what's holding the completion of the project up. So I wouldn't call it, it suggests, oh, it's only just a minor bit of path. Actually, it is quite a major part of the project that's still not been completed. And the other, I'd like to ask, that's not directly ours, what's happening to Fendon Road roundabout? Because there seems to be a lot of big holes, but not a lot of work going on at the moment. And I understand from Stagecoach that it's now 3 months behind.
Okay, right then. Councillor Wilson.
Two quick points. The first one is that I was able to go and visit the MMC project at Waterbeach on the sidelines of a skills committee meeting, and I was very impressed, and I think this is on a multi-level basis. It's serving a lot of people, the apprenticeships and the homeless people, and so I commend that. I just wanted to mention the park and ride and the £1 scheme. That was so confusing and put a lot of people off using park and ride. So I think anything that means people aren't driving into Cambridge and using the park and ride is to be commended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. It was just on page 103, something Smart Cambridge is to be confirmed. I was just wondering if we had a rough idea when that would be confirmed, because obviously that has an effect on the overall budget. And it's just something that is on a financial basis that I noticed when we were looking at the previous report, that I think actually when looking at Quick Wins and the city access stuff, a cost-benefit analysis would be really helpful for any proposal, which I did feel was sort of lacking. But obviously, if you're sticking to a budget, we need to see those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Bick.
In passing to say, I think it's really good news that the figures are on apprenticeships are what they appear to be. And although I absolutely get the point that who finishes is probably more important than who starts, but I think that in terms of our goal, it's very good news that what we read there. But I wanted to ask about funding overall for the GCP in terms of the sort of issues that are raised in section 26 of the report on page 98. I mean, I know that at this point we're sort of somehow looking into a future where we have our second tranche approved, which hasn't actually happened yet. So don't expect a detailed answer to the question at this stage, but it is the case that the partner councils responded to the obligation to put some money into the GCP kitty as part of the original city deal, and they all agreed to do that with reference to new homes bonus, and they kind of had a formula between them which made that, I think, equitable. And it does seem that the new homes bonus has been first reduced, and probably we'll see the end of it as well shortly. What would be helpful is to kind of understand the importance of that. If at a future meeting we could sort of see a graphical representation of the contributions into the GCP pot, which includes the section 106 contributions as well, I think it would be very helpful, in particular actually to members of the council's concerned, because I think that they're all probably envisaging putting less into the kitty. That wasn't actually in the deal that was made between them, that would happen because the mechanism they chose started to deteriorate. And I just think we just need to be able all to take away back to our councils a really clear understanding of what's happening there to inform the decisions we take separately.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solomon.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the forward plan, the June meeting seems quite packed already. It doesn't actually include the Greenways for what have we got? Comberton, Melbourne and St Ives, at least according to the Greenways paper. And then also we've just passed the motion that suggests we bring forward the city access stuff to June as well. Are we going to have a 2-day assembly in June, or it's just to think about, just to know.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Williams.
It's a quick one, and Peter's not here to answer it anyway. Cambridge South East Transport Study Amber, but the completion forecast is now 2024 relative to 2025. For various reasons, having a good idea of when that date is will be quite important because of other schemes that might be coming along around the same time. So it could be good to get clarification whether 24 is still quite soft or it's between 24 and 25 is quite time sensitive. Thank you.
Okay, that completes the questions. So, the answers.
So on the forward plan, just to start at the end, I guess we just need to wait for the board to decide some of those things, and then we will amend the forward plan appropriately. In terms of starting back at the start of the question, so we will ask the question about the apprenticeships and get that from Form the Future, who are doing that work for us. Obviously, we'll reflect on those concerns and support for the loss of our income, giving it to the county council, but that's why I think there is a need to bring forward that piece of work to say, actually, how do we use our levers around parking more generally and not see any part of that model in isolation. So officers are keen to work with colleagues from other authorities to do that. In terms of money and cost-benefit analysis, I mean, I think we have a really strong discipline around most of our schemes because we have to do that in order to tick boxes. And if we haven't done that anywhere, we'll make sure that we do and can strengthen that. In terms of the funding and the Section 106 contributions and the new homes bonus, yes, I think councils are all planning for that amount to reduce over time. We have done some analysis of that for chief executives of the authority, so happy to share that so that members of the Assembly can see the finances, what has been contributed and what would be in the future, depending on different percentages that might be contributed. I mean, in terms of a general point on our over-programming, you'll remember when you agreed a future investment strategy, we did agree at that time that we would revisit it after the first Gateway review, so I think it will be pertinent that we bring that back to you, perhaps not at the June meeting, which is already looking heavy, but at some point in the next 12 months once we've had the outcome of that process. I will need to refer to Peter on the couple of details on transport schemes. He's gone off to do a media interview, so I will ask him to send a note round, particularly on the answer about the South East transport scheme. We'll ask County Council colleagues about the Fendon Road roundabout, because I think that's their scheme, not ours. Hopefully that covers everything.
Right then. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. And I'd also like to thank Chris Mallion for patiently sitting in the audience there, waiting any questions. No one had any for him. Okay, you may be asking why, what could possibly be more important than a joint assembly meeting for the Transport Director to attend. And it occurs to me that that may have something to do with an announcement that occurred slightly some time ago, which I didn't want to share with you because I didn't want anyone to be distracted from the serious matter of talking about the City Access Project, which is that Grant Shapps has announced that the route for East West Rail will be the option E, which is one of those which comes via Camborne. And I'm sure that will be a subject of considerable discussion over lunch, to which we will now repair. I think Wilma will shepherd us towards the sandwiches. And as of now, I'm still minded to resume at 1:30, given that's what we've advertised to everyone. I hope we all feel that 3/4 of an hour is enough for lunch. And let's all resume at 1:30. Thank you very much.